Delusion and false hope. I could see that Ted was on a roll, and I was riveted. I knew that if I wanted to get out of the victim orientation, I was going to have to get a grip on this delusion he was talking about, and the false hope that went with it. Ted went on, "Let's look first at the delusion. Let me ask you a question. When you react to something, what do you tell yourself you are reacting to? The problem or the anxiety?" I hesitated. "Well," I said, I think I'm reacting to the problem. I mean, if the problem didn't exist, I wouldn't be reacting that way." Ted pointed toward the diagram of the victim orientation. "Okay, now look at the Frisbee. Consider those three pieces: focus, inner state, and behavior. Which one gets your reaction going?" "According to the Frisbee, it looks like I'm reacting to the anxiety, my inner state," I said. "Right. The anxiety you feel comes from your way of focusing on the problem. That's your inner state, and that is what actually drives your behavior. You may be feeling anxious because the problem exists, but the anxiety itself is not the problem. You're anxious because of the state you're in. So here's the delusion of the victim orientation. You believe you're reacting to a problem when you are really reacting to your own anxiety." "So what's your point, Ted? I'm not sure I follow." "Good question. For one thing, it's important to know that it's your anxiety, based in fear, that moves you to act when you're in the victim orientation. If you don't feel anxious, you lose your motivation to do anything about it. So with a victim orientation, in a strange way, you actually need a problem to get moving. To see why this is so important, look at how each part of the Frisbee creates a pattern of behavior with its own results. Let's start with the focus, a problem. When your wife became distant, what happened to your anxiety? Did it increase or decrease?" "When she did that, I felt more anxious. Definitely," I said. "Right. And when your anxiety increases, what happens to your tendency to react?" "Well," I said, "my desire to react also increases. I want to get rid of the anxiety." "Okay, David, this next step is critical. If your reaction is successful, meaning that it has a positive impact on your problem, what happens to the intensity of the problem?" "The problem seems less intense if I do something that seems to help." "Good," said Ted. "Now watch this. When the problem seems less intense, what happens to your anxiety?" "It goes down. Things don't seem so bad." "When the anxiety lessens, what happens to your feeling that you've got to do something about the problem?" "It goes down too," I said. I relax and take a deep breath. "Of course you would. Now here's where the delusion comes into play. Remember when I said that in the victim orientation, it's actually your anxiety that motivates you to take action? Well, when your anxiety goes away, so does your energy for taking action. So what happens if your drive to take action against the problem lessens? What will eventually happen to the intensity of that problem?" "Well," I said, "the problem might still be lurking around, kind of like a disease that's gone into remission. I'm guessing the problem would most likely reemerge, and so eventually it would seem more intense, right?" "Right," Ted exclaimed. "And when that intensity about the problem re-emerges, the whole cycle restarts itself. It's déjà vu all over again, as somebody once said. Any problem that seems to come up in your life again and again, whether it's with an employee, coworker, a loved one, or even within yourself, is virtually guaranteed to get you involved in the victim orientation. You do something about the situation, it gets better for a while, and it then recurs sometime down the road. It may take days, weeks, months, maybe even years, but it's a safe bet that the problem will raise its head again in the future." "Wait, I'm not sure I get it. Why does the intensity of the problem go up again? Didn't I solve the problem when I reacted to it the first time?" I asked. "Almost never," Ted explained. "A problem is rarely, if ever, solved from within victim orientation. To truly eliminate the source of a problem usually takes a long-term focus. In the victim orientation, that kind of focus is almost impossible, because when things do get better, you lose that get up and go energy to do something about the problem. Things get better and you relax and stop reacting to the problem, only to find it starting up all over again. Yikes. No kidding. This recurring pattern can last for years and years. Highs and then lows. More highs and then more lows. I've heard plenty of people say their lives are like a roller coaster. So David, what do you think? Have you ever fallen into this pattern? I gazed out at the approaching waves, trying to think of a time when I'd been on the kind of roller coaster drama that Ted was describing. I felt a little flustered, but I was determined. There had to be a way out of this victim cycle. I took a deep breath, looked down at my stomach, and let out a long sigh. Then it struck me. Sure, I chuckled. It may sound a little silly, but it seems like I've always been on a roller coaster with my weight. The problem shows up when I step on the scale in the morning. When I look down at the scale, there's just a mild anxiety, but I feel the weight of that number staring back at me in between my feet. I react by promising myself to diet and exercise. I stay focused and committed for a while. I start to lose pounds and inches, and pretty soon I'm feeling really great. My clothes fit better, my friends and family tell me how good I'm looking, but then something comes up, like a big holiday or a vacation. And because things are going so well, I celebrate by eating all the things I've been avoiding. The problem is that afterward, I don't go back to my healthy eating or exercising. After a while, one day I'm standing on the same scale on a whole new morning, wondering how all those problem pounds came back. Ted smiled sympathetically. You got it. That's how the victim orientation works. Your example may be ordinary, but unfortunately it's exactly the same cycle that shows up in much more serious situations like addiction. When someone quits and then he has a relapse, in situations of domestic violence and abuse relationships, a persecutor or perpetrator hurts a victim, then apologizes and pledges not to do it again. Things may seem to go well for a while, only to end in some explosive incident that starts the cycle all over again.